All right, so episode 2. This one is called "What is Masculinity?" And I think, well, the reason why I picked this episode out of our long list on is because there's a real war. There's a real war on masculinity, I think, and I do think that it comes from the woke left. I'm not saying everyone on the left is woke, but I'm saying that sort of woke ideology um, does want men to be more feminine because I think it softer men benefits them quite a lot. I would argue.
I think the main point of this show tonight, Danny, will be to first of all define what masculinity is.
I'm glad you asked because I haven't.
You have it already down. In a one sentence definition?
Yes. Yes.
Well, then let's just start there. Hit us with your definition of what you believe masculinity is.
Masculinity is a set of behavioral tendencies and traits more commonly expressed in men, shaped by biology, culture, and environment. That is the definition. Pretty much across the board. There's some variants of them, but they're pretty much that. Some were a little bit more vague. This one is the most specific that I could get.
And I think that generally hits the overall points, but that's also very vague.
It is vague.
Because what are the biological things that define masculinity? What are the cultural things that define it? And how does the environment play into it? Which is really just the overall essence of the issue that we have, because you have all essentially three of these things intertwined. You could argue that culture and environment are kind of in the same realm. So I think that biology is more in its own tier than the other, and I think the other two are more segmented together. But at the end of the day, these things have changed throughout history, throughout time. Back in the day, it was for thousands of years, a man's main duty was to go off to some war in a foreign land and to conquest and to pilgrimage, get all the women and the riches. And now there's a new modern day approach to that, whether it be gaining wealth, whether it be going to new territories, however you want to phrase that, the new verbiage of it.
The principles are pretty much the same.
At the end of the day, there's a hierarchy, right? And with every man, you want to be more towards the top of that hierarchy. The question is, what defines the hierarchy?
Well, sorry, go ahead.
And we'll break down so many of these layers, and there's so many different tiers to this, but you could think of the different avenues that you could branch from this, right? Like, okay, you have to think that you probably have to be halfway physically strong to be masculine. I think that's something that has withstood the test of time. I don't think there's ever been a point where a less physically strong man has been more manly than someone who is strong. But then you can add in different layers to it, right? Okay, well, if you have two people that are the same physical capability, then how would one be more than the other? Well, then you can look at wealth as an example. You know, wealth is a major status symbol. That's going to determine the people that you know, the connections that you have, your ability to acquire resources at a fast level. That's what all the kings had, right? The kings had all the resources because they went and took all the land. They had the gold, the castles, the women, food, everything like that. So that's a way of boasting to everyone that you are the top dog. Nowadays, it's, oh, you have the Lamborghini, or you have some people value the penthouse in Dubai or New York City maybe more than the acreage of land here in Oklahoma. So for everyone, that's a different priority, right? But at the end of the day, the goal is still the same of acquisition, but it's also what is the message and your overall goal of the acquisition, right? Are you getting these things just to say that you are masculine? Because if you don't have a purpose and a drive, I think that is more so even deeper than the things that we're talking about there. Because if you just go through life meanderly, just, oh, shit, oh, that sounds good, or this might be a good idea or whatever, I think that's the definition of not being masculine right there.
Well, no, I couldn't agree with you more. And when I was preparing for this podcast, a lot of the things you just said, I'm smiling big because it's like a lot of those things you said are actual research papers that I've pulled up, and I didn't have time to go through every single research paper, but I did read some of the abstract, and I kind of argued with AI a little bit because I wanted something to bounce my ideas off. And ChatGPT is wrong. I'll just tell you that now. But anyway, so I think in order to really define what masculinity is, we need to look across some of the things that you said. We need to look across biology, culture, environment, and we need to see what are tendencies of the masculine. Why are these tendencies typically associated with men? And there's a lot of different reasons that we'll go into. So we define masculinity. And now we need to break it onto what are the traits of masculinity, because our definition was quite vague. So,
I think one thing too that we need to distinguish is, at what weightings do we give these things? Like if there's if masculinity is calculated to 100%, right? And we determined earlier that environment and culture are kind of intertwined. So how much of masculinity is defined by biology versus how much of it is defined by culture? Is it split 50-50 down the middle? Is it biology have a higher impact? Does culture have a higher impact? I think that'll be probably one of the bigger underlying theses that we're going to have during this discussion, debate, however you want to phrase it, because until we find that out, I guess we could arbitrarily say that it's 50-50 down the middle just to make the conversation easy, but I think that would also be a lazy approach to the conversation as well, because I think the odds of that being straight 50-50 exactly in the middle is probably extremely low.
No, for sure. Well, I think really to what I was getting at is that let's look at the biology first, because that's the first thing. We're born as, we have the specific chromosomes, and that means you're a male. And with that comes quite a lot of things. Number one, we all know that males have more testosterone in the bodies than women do. But before we even get to that, let's look at, I'm going to take a little bit of a step back. Let's look at some common traits. And then from here, with these traits, we can kind of go back and forth on why we think these traits are more commonly associated with men and why. Because our ultimate question is, why? So common traits are competency, ability to handle reality, right? We could say that you need to be competent in quite a lot of things, but, you might want to pick a niche down area to build wealth. But, you're going to be looked at, we have the burden of performance. We're looked at, be handy around the house, do the physical work, et cetera, et cetera. The second one is we have responsibility or authority, because if you're going to give me the responsibility of something, then I need to have authority over it. Otherwise, it's not a responsibility. It doesn't matter. So we got competency, and responsibility. And then we have assertiveness, the ability to act and lead. I think we can say that most men, we usually talk very direct. We're very straight to the point. Typically, obviously there's nuances and there's exceptions to the rule, but typically we're pretty assertive. We just need to be like A to B to C to D to E, and etc. Okay? Then we have emotional control. I think that's a big one. So if we want to weigh these out to what weight they have out of 100%, then it's like, okay, well, emotional control is a pretty big one, because if let's say we're in a group of men, okay? We're in a group of men and we have to go to war. Let's just use the common one that we're all familiar with. We have to go to war. Who's going to lead? The guy who is finicky, he's too volatile, he's very emotional. We're not following that guy. He's going to get us all killed. We're going to take more confidence in the guy who's very calm, who understands the gravity of the situation. He might feel all the things that the other guy might feel. He might feel jittery, volatile, all these things, but he's still physically calm and present in the moment. And he's like, okay, this is what we need to do based off the circumstances. So we would say that emotional control would be pretty up there on the list in terms of how we're going to weigh these things out. And the last one we have is protection and provision, because historically, that's what we do. We're the men, we're the stronger sex. We go hunt and we bring back the resources, or we're building the infrastructure to connect everything and make everything operate better. So we have competency, responsibility, assertiveness, emotional control, and protection provision. So those are the 5 traits commonly associated with men.
I think that's definitely a good baseline to start from.
Baseline, that's a good way to put it, yeah.
And from here, I can add on to it. I think that for a man, if anything above all of those, I guess responsibility could be thrown into this, but purpose. Purpose is, if you don't have a purpose, then it's so hard to go through life and to know what you're doing and to do it accurately. Because if you don't have a bottom or a top goal that you're trying to get to, whatever it may be in your mind, then whenever life comes at you and hits you hard, it's going to be very, very easy to deviate from the path because you're like a feather in the wind. Oh, dust. Oh, whatever direction the wind's going to take me today, that's where I'm going to go. And that is a very hard way to live as a man. So if you don't have that underlying purpose and drive and really a passion for something that's bigger than yourself, whether it be the community, whether it be your faith, whether it be family, whatever your obligations may be, that is, to me, the most underlying principle that we have. Without that's the foundation for the entire thing.
Responsibility?
Yes. And with purpose being thrown in there.
Yes. So, yeah, those are pretty much, yeah. We'll just say those are the same things, essentially.
And then you get into competency, right? So we think of skills. Well, is every skill deemed the same equally in a masculine sense? So then you have to determine, well, what skills are masculine? And then from there, what skills are biologically masculine versus what skills are culturally masculine? Because what a Japanese samurai would feel as masculine is going to be a hell of a lot different than what someone in Soviet Russia thinks is masculine. But there's also underlying themes that are the same across, like we talked about the strength and a lot of the things that we talked about here. The example is that it doesn't matter what language you speak, we all laugh the same, right? That emotion is still there. And the same is with leadership too. If you're around an individual for just a few hours, you're going to have a fairly decent sense of, well, is this someone who I would not necessarily trust or whatever, but is this someone who, if we had a difficult situation to deal with, are they going to be able to handle themselves forthright, or is it going to be lead us down a longer path of chaos?
You know what? I think that's a good point because we're talking about competency here. So if we're going to weigh out like one of the most important things that a man should be competent at, because you can't be, can't be competent at everything. It's just impossible. So I would say one of the very key and core things that is essential for a man to be competent at is to be able to handle himself, to be able to fight. Because you never know. You never know when something bad's going to happen, and you might have to, it's kind of funny, but you might have to go hands-on with somebody.
The best way to achieve peace is prepare for war.
There you go. Yes, the best way for peace is to prepare for war. Yeah, I 100% agree. Because what does the lion go after? What do these large predators in the wild go after? They go for the weak and feeble, the easy prey. Because if they go against its own size, then there's a more chance of a deadly injury. And then if you get injured and you can't hunt, then you die. So you want to go to something weaker. So the weaker you are as a man, the more vulnerable you are going to be perceived. And that actually probably goes into bullying. And that's why people get bullied, is because they're perceived as weaker. And I think to counter that, I think every man should learn martial arts. I think that is one of the biggest proponents in my life that has changed me and molded me into the man I am today.
Then you add on to the layer of, okay, well, let's find out what skills we need to acquire to be masculine. Then you have to ask yourself, at what level of skill do you have to be considered competent? Let's go back to the fighting, for example. If you go to one Muay Thai class, are you now all of a sudden capable?
No.
No, I doubt it. Okay. So then, how long do you have to do it, right? And that's going to be different for every person. People have different skill levels. People are more naturally gifted. Maybe people are stronger. Maybe they're more flexible, whatever it may be. The skill curve is going to be different for every individual. So you can't say, oh, well, once you've been to 50 classes all of a sudden, or if you've sparred this many times, all of a sudden you're there. But the question is, and you can break this down, maybe you're, handiwork. How many things you have to be good at a handyman to do? If you're a plumber, but you're not an electrician, well, how competent are you in handiwork? So what, I guess that's something that we can have some dialogue about here is, and we can pick different topics, but where is it a continuous journey, which is probably the theme that I'm going to go with, is that you can never, there's so many things in life that you cannot master, no matter what. So it's, along with the purpose we talked about earlier, it's the journey of acquiring the skills of these things that is more valuable sometimes than even the skill itself.
Yeah, I think that's a very hard pill to swallow sometimes because the journey is quite grueling. So if we want to take it back to how many times would you hypothetically have to train a martial art in order to be considered competent at it? So I can speak primarily on jujitsu because I've been doing jujitsu for roughly about 7 years, and I am a three-stripe blue belt, which belts don't really mean anything. Khabib, last time I checked, was a white belt, so we'll just put that into perspective. So your belt doesn't necessarily equal to competency. It is a sign of competency, but it's it just depends. It varies and it's contextual. Like I said, Khabib's a white belt.
And it's also not. This isn't a black and white thing. It's not a oh you went to so many classes, then all of a sudden you just had that one session where boom, it's like a light switch. Now all of a sudden you went from not competent to competent. But somewhere along your 7-year journey, you acquired the skills enough to where it be a mental shift, or maybe it be just you acquired that one extra skill, whatever. At a certain point, you went from not being competent to competent. The question that our listeners and viewers will probably want to analyze for themselves is that more a mental thing, or is it you have? But even if you have the validation to prove it to yourself, like maybe you've been to so many classes, you put in all the work. If you don't mentally believe that you're competent, you're not going to be competent. So that goes back to, you can talk about control over emotions. You need control over your mind, which controls your emotions. Because if you're not able to have confidence in yourself, because I think that's another thing about masculinity is confidence, and not deranged confidence either, where you're like, you talked about earlier about not being competent in everything. I mean, there's some bastards out there that literally think they are the best at every single thing that they do. But what's the quote? Don't underestimate the person who overestimates himself, or who overestimates himself. And so there's a lot of validity in believing that you can do it. Belief is probably more than half the battle in a lot of these things.
Well, so on confidence, let's define confidence real quick because it gave me the idea. What is confidence? Confidence is not affirmations in the mirror. Confidence is the undeniable proof that you are who you say you are, or that you can do what you say you can do. So in terms of what point was I competent in jiu-jitsu, I mean, it's hard to say. I mean, it just, because it's complicated because it's such a wonky sport for one. And there's a lot of jokes around it. If you know what I'm talking about, there's a lot of jokes around it, and for good reason, because it is a very odd sport. I mean, you're fighting from your back essentially, but it's very useful. And to really weigh my competency level out, I would just, at what point? I think it's just over time, man. It's just that proof is stacked through years of grueling training at different gyms because I was started in Dubai and then I had to come back to Chickasha. So it's through different gyms, and then it's just being able to string together moves. But I think ultimately it's being able to do the thing that you need to do under stress. I think that's really that. There you go. That's how I would say I'm competent, because I can string together I can have a systematic approach to being able to subdue my opponent over and over again. So I have a system under stress that I can repeat that typically gives me a level of competence.
Here's a deeper philosophical way of analyzing it too. Is competency, do you base it more on the skills that you have or the skills that you have comparative to everyone else? Because here's an example, right? So I grew up playing golf. By the time I was 10 or 11 years old, I was better than probably about 80 to 85% of golfers in the entire world. So even at a young age, I would be considered competent by a lot of people. And then you could also have the aspect of, well, if someone's young and they're competent at it, then does that make them more competent because their age is younger, right? So then you consider all those factors into it. But then for me, like if I was 11 years old and I tried to play it against good 16-year-olds, I get destroyed, right? And then by the time I got to high school, well, you accomplished high school players, really good in high school. But if I went against elite college players, I get destroyed again. And then when I was in college, if I went against mini-tour players, I'd be destroyed. Then if you're on mini-tour, then you play against actual professionals, then you get beat, right? But yet, you can still get to that level, and you could be better than 90-something% of people in the entire world. But to me, like if I had a goal to be a professional golfer and I didn't make it, to me, I didn't feel like I was competent enough. So I think a lot of times the analyzing exactly where you are, if you were going to go from 0 to 100 on a scale of competency, you have to be able to dissect the two, because even though you may be improving yourself, if you're improving by 1% over the entire year, that may be good for you. But if everyone else around you is increasing by 4 or 5%, then technically you'd be losing competency compared to other people, but yet your competency is increasing, if that makes sense. So that's a deep way of analyzing it, but I think that for people who have the same goals that we do and the same aspirations, these are the things that you have to analyze, because you can get easily caught up in what someone else is doing. And you can't control how hard someone else works. You can't control the results that they have. The only thing you can control is yourself. But at the same time, if I take it fighting, for example, right? Like, let's say you define a competency level, be like, okay, well, I don't really want to fight, but if I have to, I need to be able to defend myself. What percentage of people do I need to be able to whoop their ass if they come and try to fight me? If John Jones comes up to me in the street, I'm probably screwed. Right? Like there's nothing you can do about that, right?
You have zero chance.
Yeah, there's no way.
There's no cards.
Yeah. So,
but you know, if the 300-pound dude who's never fought a day in his life just gets mad at me because I look at him the wrong way. So my point being is that, like, at what point along this curve, what percentage of people do you have to be able to whoop their ass, if possible, for you to be competent?
Honestly, I don't really have an answer to that question. I would just have to see the way that I would weigh competency is. Man, that's just different. It's multifactorial, because it's just there's a lot.
But you see why it's important, though, because we're discussing masculinity, and competency is a key factor to being masculine. But if you can't define what competency is, then you're not going to be able to determine what masculinity is. So that's the main reason we're having this show on this topic, is to dissect these things and to figure out. Because what's competent to me is different to what's competent to you, and the viewers out there, they may have a different version of competent, right? So I guess for each person it's going to be different, and I think probably a big underlying theme that we're going to have throughout this show is that masculinity, the definition of it, is going to vary from different people. Well, I think the definition that you read earlier with the different topics, majority of men will be able to agree with that statement.
Yes.
It's going to be more so what is contained within those words that is going to differ for
To
everyone.
what degree is masculine, to what degree is not?
correct.
Yeah. So, well, we still haven't really answered that question. So, to what degree does somebody have to be competent in their ability to handle reality? So, in terms of my jiu-jitsu, I would say, and push back on this, I would have to look at people my size, because if I go against somebody who's smaller than me, then they're not probably going to be as skilled as I am.
So that goes back again to comparing our competency to other people.
Yes,
Right.
I would have to, because competency has to have some sort of.
That's the measuring ground, right? That's probably the good question, right? It's the measuring ground. Are you measuring who you are or who you are to the others?
Well, I want to measure who I am to others and to myself. So, am I? So, if we're going to go back to confidence, do I have enough repetitions to be confident in my ability to be competent? Confidence to competent. You know what I'm saying? Because you have to have those reps under that stress. Specifically talking about jiu-jitsu or martial arts, I have to be able to have that confidence under stress to be confident in my ability to be competent. And the only way to figure that out is to compare my skill set against somebody who is close to my, how my size, my training level. Because if I'm going against somebody who's smaller and weaker than me, I'm going to bulldog that person.
This goes back to the environment part of it too, because if you're at whatever dojo you go to and no one there is competent, like we just talked about, right? If everyone's a very low level, you might be able to dominate them, so all of a sudden you feel like your skills are extremely high. But yet if you go to a different dojo and all of a sudden they have everyone who's just absolute top dog out there, who's been extremely experienced, been doing it for decades, next thing you know, you might be let down, right? So all of a sudden you could have you talked about earlier about having to deal with reality. Reality is different for everyone because everyone looks through life through a very particular lens. If you go and train in the Himalayan mountains with Buddhist monks, it's going to be a lot different than if you train at whatever just random location in your town, right?
Yeah, so that would go back to like, because I'm thinking immediately from a cultural perspective, like if you was to train with Khabib and Hamza and all those guys, they're from Kazakhstan, so that's like in the mountains, snowy. I mean, they're wrestling bears as children, but that's a cultural norm from them. That would be super weird for me. It's like I'm training in the cold. They train what Daniel Cormier took some of his kids that he trains for wrestling to Dagestan to train wrestling specifically. And they train like 3-4 times a day. I think it was 3. But they like wake up, they train, they eat, they train, then they can do whatever, and then they train again. So they're training like 3 times a day. That's normal for them. And then we're not even talking about like Khabib or Hamzat's training in itself. Like what they do as professional athletes is going to be something that is completely different or to a higher degree than what the kids were doing. You know what I'm saying? Because that's just cultural. So, yeah, I mean, culture does have a big part in it too. So it's just going to come back to like, where are these people from? Where are you training? What dojo are you from? Who was that gym? Who was your coach's coach, for example? Because I've trained under coaches. Like I don't know who your coach is from. I don't know your lineage. So you could be teaching me a string of moves that are irrelevant. Specifically, when I first started jiu-jitsu, my coach's name was Slim. Big African-Tunisian guy. Super nice guy. But he was very traditional. He did not want me training at a Gracie gym that came, or there was another gym that I went to. But he didn't want me to train. He didn't want me to cross-train because I'm a white belt. You don't know anything. You don't know enough. You could learn something at the Gracie gym, hypothetically, that you might think is cool, that you might think that you're competent and confident in, but then you bring it back to his gym, and he's like, no, that doesn't work because of this. So now you just learned a bad habit. You showed your friend, now he's got the bad habit, and then it permeates through the entire group. So now everybody's got bad habits because you pulled off a cool move that you thought was cool. But then a black belt, somebody who's more competent and confident than you, is going to come and be like, hey, that system of moves that you did, that they don't work. That chain of moves, that doesn't work. And this is why. And then now you're just like, oh, okay. So I guess what I'm getting at is that, yeah, culture is going to play a role in it. And yeah, that's what I got.
Let's do this.
My trainer, yes, he's a black belt, so he has more. So if we're going to measure competency, then time is going to be an aspect of that. So time, okay? What else?
And not just time, but the time you put into it. Yeah. The effort exerted from it. And then you have the effect of, well, if you're more locked in when you do the work, you're going to progress at a higher level. Like you talked about the brothers in Dagestan. Or if you're training that often, that's all you think about, you don't have any other bullshit going on, you're going to be able to get to your goal, which is something that every single person needs to take note of. And we talked about this on the last show, where you have 100%, you have a pie. Your pie can get bigger, but the 100% inside of the pie cannot increase. That's all you have. So you think of someone like Mike Tyson, right? Mike Tyson, that's all he did. Breathe. He wanted to be a conqueror. Modern day conqueror for him was whooping ass in the ring. And that's what he did. That's what he lived, breathed, and slept. Didn't do anything else. He didn't worry about, what's going on in the freaking news today. He didn't worry about trying to work some other 9-to-5 job when he was working on trying to become a when he was at least in his prime trying to get after it, right? The point being is, every single person has bullshit in their life that if they cut it out and put their focus into other areas, then they would become more skilled at that thing. But going back to also of knowing what you want, because if you don't exert effort into the right areas, then you can become skilled at stuff that you don't even care about. And I think that is along the sides of as anti-masculine as you can get. the term I would use would be a drifter. If you're drifting through life, really no matter at what level, if you're not going through it with not even necessarily clear vision, because it's hard to go through this life with clear vision. There's so much bullshit we talked about in the last show. So many things in this world could go wrong just like that, and your life's screwed. But being competent enough to be able to have enough skill to where if those things did happen, that you wouldn't die within the first 5 minutes of a zombie apocalypse.
A gay zombie apocalypse?
The gay zombies.
The gay zombies?
Come after you, Danny. You need to have enough skills in your toolbox to where you won't be one of the first ones taken out. Maybe you can live for another decade or so, spout out a few babies, and maybe your bloodline's the one that finds the cure to the gay zombies. But if you're not competent and skilled enough, next thing you know, your bloodline ends. And now no one cures the gay zombies because you weren't skilled enough. Congratulations.
So wait, do I die or do I become a gay zombie? Because there's an important distinction there.
Either way, Danny, the cure doesn't happen. Because if you're a gay zombie, you ain't reproducing. So your bloodline still ends.
Just eating gay people.
Is that how you want to live your days?
No.
So work hard today, Danny, so you won't get raped by the freaking gay zombie.
They run. That's scary. And my left knee, since, I was injured in combat. I'm a combatter. Anyway, and just real quick side note, it's not Kazakhstan, it's Dagestan. That was my fault. I said Kazakhstan, and then you said Dagestan, and I was like, yes, you corrected.
Dagestan earlier?
No, I said Kazakhstan because, I don't know. That's what I thought. So they're all the same.
Here's another layer to the masculinity. We'll kind of go down this route. Go back to the story of Genesis, Adam and Eve. What was Adam's punishment for eating from the tree of knowledge of good and evil?
Sorry. Well, it was death, but I don't think it was in the physical sense, but not immediate.
Correct.
It's death in the long term.
Yes. It was supposed to be eternal before that. You had banishment from the garden. You would eventually die. And you'd be forced to do work, labor, which is the one that I want to get into. So if the first man, his fate was to work, then a lot of the purpose that a man has is revolved around work. The question is, what work is deemed meaningful versus what work is masculine, and then what work can provide for you in the ways that give you other masculine qualities. And for any man out there, we think of the 100% thing, right? If you can do something that dips your toe into as many different areas as you can to level up, then that's the best use of your time. Here's an example. Like if you go to the gym and you work out, or if you go to jiu-jitsu or Muay Thai. Okay, one, you're going to increase your combat ability. Okay, so you're increasing that. You're going to increase your health because you're getting your heart rate up and you're burning off body fat, so you have that. You're going to have more endurance going forward because of this. You're going to should have more confidence going forward. You're going to have endorphins released, so you're going to feel good. They say, we haven't even covered everything. That's 5 things that you can get from an hour class, jiu-jitsu, right? Versus if you play a video game for an hour, you may learn a couple things. There may be something about the game you really like or whatever, but you're not getting any movement. You might be stimulating your brain, but it's not necessarily in ways that's going to be extremely productive for you going forward. The point being is that the hour fitness class is going to do a lot more masculinity and a lot more productivity for you than the video game. But then also, too, you get on the same lines, well, if that's the case, then why don't I just train every single minute of every single day to do it? Like Arnold Schwarzenegger, he wasn't in the gym 12 hours a day because at a certain point, there's a law of diminishing returns. Or if you it's sort of like, well, the restaurant. Why doesn't the restaurant just hire 1,000 waiters and waitresses? Well, you're not going to have 1,000 people to wait on. So there's a certain point where you don't hire that many people because they're not going to be able to provide any value back to you. And so the same thing with your time. And you have to be able to decipher, okay, we might have the brothers in Dazakhstan who can train 9 hours a day. And here's another way of looking at it. So whenever I first got into my training, which isn't, there's a lot of people that train a lot harder than me, but definitely gave it my best. I was training every single day, 7 days a week. And at a certain point, I wasn't able to recover at all. So I was doing more harm than good from exerting more effort, right? I started seeing a lot better results by the time that I cut it down to about 5 days a week. When I would dedicate actual rest days, the improvement increased, right? But you would think that, okay, working out less isn't more masculine, right? You would think that, okay, well, if you cut down your workout time, you're kind of a pussy. But yet you're getting more of a return from it if you do take that away. Plus, that also opens up your day to make money, to go out and network with people. So whatever goals else you want to have, work on your projects at home. So it gives you more time to do that. So we're dissecting so many different layers into this masculine puzzle that we have here. And I don't know how clear of a picture that we can get. Like after this discussion, we're not going to have 100% of the answers solved. And I think that even when we're on our deathbeds, Danny, we're not going to have 100% of the answers solved. But we want to have as many of them as we possibly can.
Well, I think we could also kind of dissect this puzzle by understanding what masculinity is not. Because if there are some positives, there's positive masculinity. I do not believe that there's such thing as toxic masculinity. And that is something that we can get into later. But we know what masculinity is. We have at least some core traits and values that are pretty much associated with masculinity. They're typically found in males, and we'll get into that. We'll get into more into that here in a minute. But what masculinity is not, it is not aggression for no reason. As in, men are out here, well, of course, there are some individuals out here being aggressive for no reason. But typically, that's not masculinity. Masculinity in itself is not aggressive for no reason. It has a purpose. We have biological functions that are that give us the heightened sense of aggression.
It's the control of the aggression, which is masculine. Because if we're sitting here, and right now we're not being aggressive. We're sitting here talking about it, but we're not aggressive right now. But if we have a freaking lion run up in here, we're going to need to be pretty aggressive pretty quickly, or else we're dead. And so here's another example. If your house gets invaded, burglars break in, you call the cops. You probably want the cops to be pretty angry and aggressive when they come in your house to get rid of the burglars. But then you'd say, okay, well, what if you're out here in the park? Or right now, what if I just flipped this table over and started raging like the Hulk? That's not very masculine, right? But when the lion runs up in here, I need to be hulkish. I need to be as Hulk as I can. It's being able to control the switch is, I believe, the underlying biggest component of this whole where the emotional is. It's being able to, you individually, being able to determine. It's a classic James Bond thing. What does he say in Skyfall? When a lot of times it's not necessarily being able to pull the trigger, it's knowing when not to pull the trigger. And that is extremely masculine, and knowing what situations determine anger and assertiveness versus what situations don't.
So it'd be contextual.
It's being able to control the switch is, I believe, the underlying biggest component of this whole where the emotional is. It's being able to, you individually, being able to determine. It's a classic James Bond thing. What does he say in Skyfall? When a lot of times it's not necessarily being able to pull the trigger, it's knowing when not to pull the trigger. And that is extremely masculine, and knowing what situations determine anger and assertiveness versus what situations don't.
Yes. I think actually Mike Posner actually had another good analogy. You're familiar with who Mike Posner is, right? Okay, so he went on a journey because he was, he was in Hollywood doing his thing, whatever, whatnot. He started feeling signs of depression or symptoms of depression. So he went on a journey, and I think he actually climbed Everest. And one of his stories about learning how to control himself and when to and when not to, he was at the peak of Mount Everest, and he was with, I believe, his guide or some other partner of his that climbed with him. And when you're at the peak, you're taking turns to see as far as the eye can see. But I think that it was a bit of not a scuffle to who's going to go first or who's going to be at the peak for however long, but for some reason or another, he felt like he was almost going to fall off. Mike Posner felt like he was going to fall off and tumble down the mountain. So then he turns around to the guy who's up there with him, and he says, you need to back the fuck up. But he had to yell it. He had to assert himself. So that was a time when the stakes are higher, when your life is in danger or in peril, or there's going to be some sort of physical or mental harm, then that would be the time to understand when to be aggressive. And then if it's not going to fall under that category, then it's probably best not to be aggressive.
Here's another area. Let's break this down in depth. Is it simply someone is masculine versus they are not masculine? Or is it dissected deeper that, this person is part masculine, but they're not full masculine?
I would say it would have to be a range. I would say you're masculinely
And then what ranges do we give that then? Is there you are not masculine whatsoever. Then you have you're somewhat. Then you have, you're really masculine, but you could still be better. Then you have you're max level masculine. 99 across the board, all stats maxed out.
I would say it would have to be a range. I would say you're masculinely, and I would say
In every area?
the more powerful I get, the less hair I have.
You have no flaws?
No, it would just shut down. It'd I can't even say its name. It would just be. It would shut itself down.
So if ChatGPT went in and said, create me the most masculine quintessential example that you can think of, you're what it would spit out.
It would try to blackmail other people.
So if we have our AI sentient problem like we talked about in the last show, all we have to do is ask it to create its most 99 percentile masculine figure, and it'll just end.
Just my face. And you're like, who the fuck is this guy?
Kill switch for the ChatGPT. Yeah. I've had enough.
I'm done. Hey, ChatGPT, you want to come on my shitty podcast?
I wonder how much dumb information AI would have to receive before it said, wow, it's over. I'm tired of it.
Yeah, it's like, if you go on Twitter and it's like, hey, make Sydney Sweeney or whatever celebrity into this outfit, like just something ridiculous, not necessarily something sexual, because I know that's where people's minds are going to go. But then it's like pictures of
Danny, I'm going to venture to bet that 99% of people that went on to AI and said, put Sydney Sweeney in this outfit, it was probably sexual. Show me the guy that didn't do that. That's not masculine.
Yeah, how masculine is he now?
Put Sydney Sweeney in a nice business-style tuxedo.
Gay?
Who the hell did that?
Nobody, ever.
Not one person. Okay. Okay, let's just be clear on that, Danny. Okay. I get you're trying to be PC there, bro, but come on. This goes back to being real, accepting reality.
Not even gay zombies do that.
This goes back to being real, accepting reality. The reality is no one uses AI to make Sydney Sweeney put on any clothes that are not provocative.
Yeah. What was your original question again?
The different levels of masculinity and what we define as, I guess, the barrier between being masculine versus not masculine.
Well, I mean, the best way I would say is there would have to be a range, but then we're going to have to ask another question. What is the range? How do you measure that?
Okay, how about this?
To what degree?
How about this? Let's think about the Saudi prince, for example, or a Saudi prince, whatever. Might have billions of dollars, billionaire. But he's fat. He's out of shape. He couldn't even jog if he wanted to. He might be able to get how many ever women he wants, but they don't love him. They don't like him. They just like his money. Then you have the aspect of, okay, well, does wealth define masculinity? Then you say, okay, what about the son of the billionaire who inherited it all? Does that define masculinity because he was born in the right place, right time? Or is it how you acquire the wealth is what makes you masculine? So then I think you have to dissect if it's not necessarily even the skills that you have, it's how you acquire them. And the assets that you have, how you acquire them.
I would agree because how you acquire them. Yeah. Well, because the journey to acquire the assets requires a level of competence. You have to know what you're doing. The only reason you can know what you're doing is through the journey. So there's no way to get to the end goal of I want a Lamborghini without going through the journey of acquiring enough money, monetary value to exchange for the Lamborghini. So it's through the journey that you are able to establish confidence and competence.
Let's go back to the Saudi prince example, right? If he's the example I said, say 400 pounds, the only thing he has going for him is his wealth. He's a billionaire, but he can't fight, can't do anything else that we considered masculine that we just talked about. So we would deem him as not masculine. Okay. What if he's 400 pounds and all of a sudden he loses that? Now he's only 200 pounds. Is he masculine then?
I would say he's more masculine.
More masculine, okay. But is he quote unquote masculine at that point?
To a degree he is, but he could be more masculine.
Then you say, well, what if he goes to jiu-jitsu for 3 years? And he actually learns to do that. Now all of a sudden is he masculine?
He's more masculine.
But what if he doesn't have control of his emotions? What if he yells at the waitress because she doesn't bring his water back? Doesn't fill his water up in time?
He's like the Diet Coke of masculine. Just 1 calorie, not masculine enough.
Then we have break it down even to more layers inside of that. What does that mean for his role in society? Like, what role does masculinity have in the grand picture? Because even though he's not necessarily masculine based on the traits that we just said, he's a billionaire. He's going to have a lot of pull in the actual world, right?
Well, I was going to say that you could measure masculinity to the degree in which you could provide value to your community. But if you're the Saudi prince, if you're 400 pounds and you're rich and you don't know how to fight and you can't control your impulses or your emotions, that's not really masculine, even though he could provide a lot of resources and value to his community. So, I see where you're getting at.
Here's another example. Have you seen the James Bond movies? So in Skyfall, the start of the movie, he takes gets shot off the train, and they think he's dead, right? So all of a sudden he goes to the Caribbean island or the tropic island, wherever it is, and he's just lollygagging, not really contributing, just basically not exiled, but he's exiling himself essentially from doing what he would consider his duty. So is he now less masculine since when he was on the mission before? Because now he's in the tropic island, not doing what he knows that he's supposed to be doing?
I would say not necessarily, because he still completed a task. He was giving something and he saw it all the way through. And even before that, he had to go through the journey of becoming 007. So he wasn't born 007. He had to initiate some sort of sequence or behavior to begin the training process, the journey of becoming 007. And then once he is given the title of 007 because he earned it, then he's given said task. And then he completes the task to 100% of its maximum capacity to the best of his ability to achieve that certain goal, that mission. That mission is now complete. He saw it all the way through. He had to do all the work even before that. So now he can rest. He can put his shield away.
Probably the way of looking at it is, once you become masculine, can you lose it? Go back to the James Bond example. What if he goes to the tropic island and he gets fat? And he doesn't do anything. And he just sits there and just watches the ocean all day and has no purpose and yells at all the villagers and calls them explicit names all day and just causes chaos for everyone. So then at what point would his masculinity be lost?
When you start losing self-control, because your ability to control yourself is going to be directly correlated to the things that you achieve in life.
So it's sounding like that the more and more that we dissect this, that self-control and discipline is probably the biggest determining factor on if someone is masculine or not.
Yes, I would agree.
Also, a way to think about it would be, we'll talk about James Bond, right? Or like one of the movies I saw when I was flipping through TV then, that was the Bourne movie, Jason Bourne. So this is a guy who's top-tier spy. Could probably do just about anything that he wanted that would be deemed, in our culture, masculine. He can chase down someone. He could sneak and infiltrate into a top-secret building. He can get any information that he wants to. But he's also on the run. A lot of people don't even know he exists. So he's not really contributing, right? But is he still masculine? Because he has all those skills. But how many skills would have to be taken away before he's not deemed masculine anymore?
I would say then that would be dependent on the task or mission or goal that you have in mind.
And is that determined by him or is that determined by his peers and society?
Probably his peers, because he decided to undertake the journey to become who he is. And then he became born.
What if the society around you thinks that you're not masculine, but all the... What if the woke society becomes so bad that every single person thinks that what we just deemed as masculine is not masculine anymore? Does that make it not masculine?
No.
Why?
That's a great question. It's not...
So then that would go back to your definition of masculinity is come within you, which would not be determined by your peers, because you can't control what your peers think.
That's true. Yeah.
But if you're comparing yourself on competency and skill, as we talked about at length earlier, then you have to compare yourself to other people. So it's almost paradoxical in a sense.
Yeah.
And for every single person, it's just like everything in life. We say a lot of jokes in here that if we were in certain rooms, we'd probably have shit thrown at us. They'd say like, wow, you guys are so offensive. Y'all are ridiculous. And we're sitting in here laughing our ass off. And we'd probably get around other people who say even more ridiculous things than we do. I know there's people out there that are more ridiculous than us. So for every person, it's that finding that line. Where is your line in the sand? And for us on the journey of trying to become as masculine as we can, we have to determine what that is first. Because if we don't determine what it is, it'd be like if we had a bow and arrow and we just shot it up in the sky and just let go. Oh, I hope it's something. Hope I hit a deer today. Maybe I'll be able to eat now. Well, no, you see what you want and you aim and then you release. So if we get the target of what we want and what we believe is masculine, then we're going to have a hell of a lot better chance of getting there.
Well, yeah, I would say it's going to determine on, it's just crazy how, like, nuanced this get and how multi-layered. It's like it's not a really easy thing to just stamp on it, you know? So I think it's definitely going to come down to discipline, competency. I don't know, man.
Also, too, what I think this entire last hour that we've been talking shows is that it's really clear as to why masculinity is so misunderstood in the world. Because we're sitting here and we talked about it for however long, and we might have more questions than answers now at this point. Because the further you go down in the rabbit hole, the more things get exposed. And just like anything, whenever you're trying to validate a claim, you need to go through and try to find all the cracks in the logic that you can. And this is a topic to where there are a lot of cracks, because so much of it is subjective and determined by other people's interpretations, really, of the world. But also at the same time, we've talked that how important strength is and how important discipline is, and these things that transcend time. Alexander the Great was very strong. He had a lot of courage. He was very responsible. He was very disciplined. He had ambition. He had drive. Wanted to be remembered for thousands of years. Well, he accomplished that. And so certain things, traits that he had thousands of years ago, still stand true to masculinity today. But there's also things that will be masculine today that by the time we're old and wrinkly and we have kids and grandkids, there may be a different term of masculinity. You know, the clothes that we wear today may not be deemed masculine in 30 years. Things that we wear today, we might laugh at and say, oh my God, you wore that. You know, a great example is, you know, Danny, I don't know if you remember this, but when we were in school, if you wore shorts that were above the knee, that was feminine. That was you swung for the other side. That was a leading giveaway. Now, if you wear shorts, if you're a male and they go below the knee, it looks trashy. So that's a culture shift. I would have never, 20 years ago, would have never imagined that I'd wear shorts that were above the knee. Now almost every short I have is like that. So certain things will evolve with time. And also, too, like clothes deemed with masculinity, I think that's more an outward portrayal. That's not necessarily but also, too, then if you showed up here and we did this podcast and you were wearing a formal dress, silk dress.
Damn, silk? It sounds like you had this thought out.
Yeah, I'm envisioning it right now in my head. The whole time we've been talking, I've been picturing it. The point being is, things will evolve over time, but also you can use your outward portrayal to show other people the goals that you try to have. If you wear a silk dress as a man, your goal is probably not to show people that you're masculine. If it is, you're a dumbass, and you need to evaluate your priorities.
You're definitely going the other way on that one. Yeah.
So let's kind of bring all this back to the main central thing. We have determined that culture, environment, and biology are all main contributing factors in it, and trying to determine how each of these has an exact percentage in someone's ability to be masculine is extremely hard to determine. I think it's more so the awareness that people need to have on these things. You need to realize that certain things in your environment may be leading you away from what is traditionally masculine. You may be living we might be a lot more woke as a society in 20 years than we are now. The next thing you know, then that culture is going to have a massive impact on it. And then biology, if you do biology over a long enough time frame, then you could disevolve a lot of things that are masculinity. But I mean, this is going to take thousands and thousands, maybe even potentially millions of years. But still, that's always in play if it's done over a long enough time frame. So for everyone out there, a good homework exercise would be to sit down and think about your life and make a little T-chart. Things you do on a daily basis that you think are masculine. Do things on this side that you would deem not masculine. And maybe you have a column in the middle where it's like, I do this thing and it's not really one or the other. It's maybe just part of life. Maybe you sit at a desk for your job and you type in a spreadsheet. Well, that's not really masculine, but also it may give you money to where you can invest in things that make you masculine, right? So, if you work a job that you hate, but you use the money you make from the job to go to a jiu-jitsu class, join a gym. Maybe you enroll in a fitness course online and you do all the videos all the time, whatever it may be. You get knowledge to acquire yourself, to get more skills that are masculine. But if you work your job and you take your money and you go out to the bar every weekend and you spend all your money on booze and bad substances, then all of a sudden that effort that you're putting in that you wouldn't deem masculine is not, it's literally counterintuitive to the main thing that you would be trying to do. That's the classic do as I say, not as I do. What was the quote from Batman Begins? It's not who we are, but it's what we do that defines us. So most people, they might think they want to be masculine, they talk masculine, but if you took the words out and you just recorded your life for a week and watched the things that you did, and you showed them to a random person, would they think that you're masculine? Most of the time, for most people out there who think they are, the answer would probably be no.
Yeah. So then I would say that that's another little cue that we have. Masculine is also based off of culture, as we said. And what else did we say? Competency, right?
Competency, responsibility, assertiveness, emotional control, protection, and provision.
So I think we can look at some statistics. I had a little bit more time to prepare this time, so I was able to put together some statistics. I don't know where they're from, which is kind of a problem, but we can go over this and kind of help us narrow down a sort of range of specific key characteristics that define masculinity. So World War I, let's look at wars, because men are usually the ones who go to war because we have a lot more testosterone, and in those sort of environments, men typically are more assertive. I actually do have a study that would support my I'd have to find it, man, but I had this study poured up that is that went into exactly what I'm trying to talk about, the behavior aspect of it. This motherfucker. Anyway, World War I. So we can agree that men typically are the ones men are the ones who are typically going to be fighting the wars, right? So World War I. How many of them were men? Let's see, 16 to 20 million total deaths, 9 to 10 million military deaths, overwhelmingly men. So France, 1.3 million soldiers killed. That's 16 to 17% of them were military-aged men from 18 to 45. Germany, 2 million soldiers killed, 13 to 15% of military-aged men. United Kingdom, 886,000 soldiers killed, 12% of those served. So those were men. Male representation in those sectors. And we can even look past war. We can look at what sort of job categories are typically predominantly men. So we can look at construction, 90% male. Installation or repair, that'd be 95% male. Production, 70 to 75% male. And transportation, that's kind of, I guess that would make sense, 80 to 85% male. So a good question to ask is, why is it that men typically seem to congregate, if that's the word I could use, in these industries, and typically war? And one of those reasons would be because we have higher testosterone than women. And testosterone is a primary driver of sexual reproduction, strength, assertiveness, and those things like that. So I guess if we're going to have a degree and range in which we could say somebody is masculine, I would say that part of that is going to be how much testosterone one has in your body. Because if you don't have a lot of testosterone in your body, then that is going to affect your behavior, the way you think, and everything like that. So I would also say that we need to add in there that it's going to be dependent on how much testosterone one has in their body, because women are typically not as masculine. Some women do have higher testosterone in their bodies, in which case they seem to don more masculine traits. And so I think that is a point of discussion as well. How much testosterone does one have in their body in order to increase or even decrease their amount of masculinity?
So with the testosterone debate, right? Like if you have a very high level of testosterone, but you don't do anything with it, is that more masculine than someone who has half the amount of testosterone but actually does the actions that someone with high testosterone would do?
No, not necessarily, because I would say testosterone would be more like a tool. You know what I'm saying? Like, you have it, but it's up to you to use it or not. So if you have testosterone, but you don't really put it to any use, let's just, I don't know, maybe you're fat and lazy, or you play video games all day, or...
But usually if you're fat or lazy, you do have low testosterone.
Yeah. Yes.
Usually your actions can lead to that as being what came first, the chicken or the egg?
Yeah. So I would say, yeah. I mean, testosterone would be like a tool. Yes, it's it's a function of biology, but it's also, it's up to you to use it or not. And so if you have testosterone, a lot of it, and you don't use it, I would say no, that is not very masculine of you.
The main thing testosterone is there for is to give you the energy and the libido needed to reproduce. So then we think back and got onto it as being masculine reproducing.
Yeah.
So,
yes.
but then you ask, if a man does not reproduce, is he not masculine?
Not necessarily. So it'd have to go back to it'd have to be cultural or some other reason. So it would be contextual, because even people who have higher testosterones, that doesn't necessarily mean that it causes higher likeliness of aggression. It modulates sensitivity to status and competition. So typically, you can see testosterone higher in individuals, and males specifically, when we're around, in war, for example, because you could say that's kind of a competition in a manner, or in sports. So
let's talk about something along those lines. And you kind of hinted at it earlier, but it was just in passing. Let's talk about toxic masculinity, because I think that testosterone and toxic masculinity kind of get intertwined together. And toxic masculinity is sort of like the new racist, where you just call someone a racist just because you want to. So it seems like anytime a man does something that is deemed anywhere sort of on the fringe of not conforming to society, they scream toxic masculinity. You see it more so in more democratic or liberal states or countries than in conservative, for sure.
Well, yeah, I would say it's not toxic masculinity, because it's not masculinity in itself is not toxic. I would say that it's more immature masculinity would be a better term for it, because you can have a younger guy. For example, I was at the park not too long ago, and one of the geese laid its eggs on sort of like the dam at Shan Springs Park. And I was walking my dog, and I kind of noticed this guy poking around with it. And he's a younger man, so obviously he's going to, test his boundaries of how he feels about his environment and everything like that around it. And so I understand where he's coming from, but I can also understand that, why are you messing with this goose and the goose eggs? And so I told him, I was like, hey man, leave the duck alone, because you don't need to be messing with the duck. It's got its kids. It's just it's doing its thing. Leave nature as it is. You don't need to mess with it. It's not doing anything to you. And he's like, but it's got something. I was like, I had to get assertive with him. I was like, leave the duck alone. And then he kind of held his head down and he walked off. And so, save me now.
Let's connect all of this back together, right? Let's bring all of this full circle right here. Toxic masculinity is something that whenever you don't know what masculinity is, that's when you throw it around. Or you don't know what other terms are. Here's what I would think of when I think of someone who's toxic masculinity would be the controlling boyfriend who won't let the girlfriend hang out with her friends, won't let her go out on the weekend, won't let her do whatever, and tries to dictate every single move that she does. That's not necessarily toxic masculinity, that's a narcissist. And that's something that goes between both genders. There's just as many women narcissists as there are men narcissists. But then you have the aspect of, well, if you have a girlfriend and she wants to go out to the club without you, you should probably put your foot down and say that this is not acceptable. But then people use that as toxic masculinity because the girl wants to go off and be free or express herself.
Gee, there's kind of a segue, but relevant. So, have you ever heard of the podcast Call Her Daddy? Okay, well, you probably don't want to hear it, but it's there's this podcaster. Her name's Alex Cooper. She has a podcast. It's very left-leaning, and it's called Call Her Daddy. You can already infer everything you need to know by the title alone. And she had Hillary Duff on recently. And Hillary Duff went on to explain, and this is the perfect example of what you just talked about, of when a man should put his foot down and when he should not, which goes into assertiveness, essentially. and probably cultural relevance too. But anyway, Hilary Duff's talking about how when she first met her current husband, I don't know his name, that she was unsure or didn't really like him because he was too nice. And at the time, she had just gotten out of a divorce or a breakup. I think it was a divorce. And she was wanting to experience a little more chaos before she married her current husband. So she was actually kind of pushing her now current husband away at the time because she wanted to experience more chaos. And so from a man's point of view, it's like that would have been a very good moment to put your foot down, and it really just kind of shows you the sort of mating strategies that women have and men have. But back on your assertive thing, that would have been a good time for a man to put his foot down and be like, hey, like that's full. I wouldn't even have married her. That's just crazy. But that would have been a very important time for him to be assertive. And that would be deemed by them toxic masculinity if he was to put his foot down and be like, hey, like what you just said was kind of messed up and out of pocket. And for you to even say that onto a podcast, a very, very famous, popular podcast with millions of views and brand deals, is inappropriate. But if you say that nowadays, that's deemed toxic masculinity, because toxic masculinity is thrown out there when women really just deem any behavior from you is they're in disagreement with it. So if they disagree with you about, hey, I want to go out to the club, you're like, no, because you're going without me, and you're going into a very hypersexualized environment that caters to that sexualization with alcohol, dancing music, rap music, shaking your butt, et cetera, et cetera. So if you're going to go out there to the club and do that, those are behavior sets that I don't like. Now, if you would put your foot down as a man these days and assert yourself, even in a polite way, because assertiveness doesn't necessarily mean rudeness. If you assert yourself and say, hey, I'm not comfortable with that behavior because of this and this reason, then it's insecurity or it's toxic masculinity. And so it's like, no, that's just an excuse when you have unfavorable circumstances or behavior from your man or from a man. And it's really just an excuse for you to go be debaucherous and give yourself the pass, because a lot of, I would say that women don't have the same degree of accountability as men do. And I would say accountability, well, that goes back to responsibility.
I think that what we're starting to determine here, the longer that we go into our podcast, is that so many of these things that, like, we could look up the definition of masculinity, punch it into Google, ChatGPT, or whatever. But it's not a statistic. It's not a verifiable fact. It's not something that is etched in stone that is going to be there forever. And it's not the same for every person either. It is every single man's responsibility to determine for them what masculinity means to them, so that they can become the best version of themselves and become as masculine as they view that they need to be. Because my version of masculinity is probably different than yours. We probably share a lot of very similar similarities, but even going through here, there's probably a couple of things where it varies. And if we flipped our schedules and flipped our routines and how we felt, I might feel masculine, you might not, right? Even though we did the same things. So the mind controls so much more than anyone wants to admit. But as you mentioned earlier with confidence, you have to have verifiable evidence to support yourself. If you think that you're jacked and strong and extremely fit, and you weigh 300 pounds and you never go to the gym and you eat Kentucky Fried Chicken every meal, then you're just delusional. So there's a line between delusion and confidence. But at a certain point, you have to be, like even when we started this show, right? We have grand plans for our podcast. For us to achieve what we want, we have to be somewhat delusional. Other people listen to some of the things we say and they'll think you're crazy. There's no way you can do that. Well, we're going to. It's going to happen. You have to be confident enough to believe that you can do it and delusional enough to believe that you're going I kind of butchered that quote there. The point being is that masculinity all boils down to what you deem that it is. You're going to have to be disciplined. You're going to have to be strong. You're going to have to have responsibility. You're going to have to be able to provide, but you have to know what to provide for. You have to know what responsibilities you want to have. You have to know what areas of strength do you want to have. Because if you can, it's going to take a different type of strength to be able to whoop someone's ass versus if you need farm strength or if you need to work in the oil field, whatever it may be. These are all things that for you need to determine for yourself, and that is where the true journey of masculinity begins, with each person individually. You try to get around like-minded people who have the same goals of masculinity that you do. Because we may all be trying to go to the same, we may try to be going to the same spot, but if we all have different paths to get there and think the path is different to get there, then you could be doing more harm than good.
I got to push back on one thing, though. Because masculinity has to be something objective, too. Because if it's subjective, then that leaves it up for, it could just be everything. And if it's everything, then it can be nothing. Because you just can't be everything. You know, Superman, for example, had this problem when he was first being created. When he was first created, he didn't really have any weaknesses. And so nobody could really relate to Superman because he was just all-powerful. And if he's all-powerful, then he can't be hurt or weakened. And if he can't be hurt or weakened, then how am I going to relate to... I can't relate to God because God can't be hurt. God is not... He's infinite. He's beyond our comprehension. And so, therefore, I cannot relate to God. I could not relate to Superman. So that's when they started introducing things like kryptonite, or that he needs to be under a yellow sun in order to absorb the radiation and be strong. And that's how he heals. So masculinity has to be objectively something. At least a baseline, a start period, because it can't just be all subjective. Because once it's subjective, again, that's too.
Well, I think the baseline is the definition that we started the show off with, along those same lines, where you could say that you take the certain attributes that you think would be that have transcended time, as we mentioned, the physical capability, need to have courage, and there's certain things that are unwritten rules of being a man. You're on the Titanic and it's sinking. Women and children first. You don't shove the 5-year-old girl and the pregnant woman out of your way so you, the 35-year-old man, can get on the boat. You don't do that. So that's something that is probably a fight or flight survival instinct thing, which you would think that, okay, well, survival is so that you do survive. But it's about survival of the entire species as opposed to just yourself. Which is why if you have one woman survive and 100 men, and you need to reproduce, the woman's going to get pregnant by one man, and she's going to be pregnant for 9 months. Where if you have one man and 100 women, you could have that one man impregnate all 100 women. Next thing you know, you have 100 kids in 9 months, right? So I think that's the point. So going back to the biology part of it, there's certain things that are wired within us from that. Where you're going to do things to protect your species, to protect your family, to protect your bloodline. That's just there. I don't think that you need to really learn that. I think it just happens. Like if you have a kid, like you don't need to be taught to care for it. You need to be taught how to care for it as in terms of the procedures and things, but not the actual mental side of it, of saying, oh, I need to love this thing. It's just there. And so there's certain things that'll come to you. For example, masculinity, right?
Instinctual.
Eventually you're going to be around some other men. And whenever they can all lift the big hay bale over their heads, and you can't pick up the hay bale that's half the size, all of a sudden you're going to feel inferior to them, which is going to make you realize that strength is what you need to be masculine, correct? So it's the underlying definition is the baseline of what you're talking about. It's these things that you need to have. The physical capability, courage, responsibility, integrity, purpose, journey. But it's up to everyone's subjective from there to dissect from those areas to figure out what matters to them. And what level of physical capability are you masculine? Because what it is to me is going to be different than a viewer. It'll be different to you. It'd be different to the coach at the dojo. It'd be different to the CEO of Apple, whatever it may be. That goal is going to be different for each person. But they can fulfill their own journey of masculinity based on the parameters that they set for themselves. Also, the quote that I said earlier that I butchered was, you have to be delusional enough to believe it's possible and disciplined enough to prove yourself right.
Well said. Who's that from?
I'm honestly not sure.
I've heard that before.
I have a long list of quotes in a spreadsheet that I try to read all the time and try to have them off the top of my head. I didn't do a very good job with that one, but I probably have close to 1,000 quotes in here, so give me a little bit of a pass.
I mean, it's late at night. What time is it right now?
We're also about 12:30 a.m. That's how hard we're working out there. I hope everyone realizes that.
Yeah, this is our second episode. I mean, I think this one's going to turn out way better.
And the third one will be better than this one. And the fourth one will be better than that one.
And I think we're going to kind of sidetrack real quick as we wrap it up, but I think that's the important thing that I would say as entrepreneurs, as people actually in the trenches, is you just got to do it. Like, just start.
It's the action. Like we talked about earlier with the testosterone thing. You could have all the testosterone in the world, but if you sit on the couch and don't do anything with it, then you ain't masculine. Doesn't matter.
Like, we just constantly thinking and messaging each other how this thing could be better. How can we do better? Who's going to be our first guest? How are we going to do the audio? How are we going to set it up? So it's a lot more intricate, just like the definition of masculinity. Like, putting this thing together is a little bit more intricate than you would think. There's a lot of rigging up that we had to do.
Well, I'm sure a lot of people who are watching this may have come from listening to me doing my golf podcast, where it's mostly audio recording. And there's a whole shitload of a lot more work that has to be done in video than audio.
Yeah, I mean, this took me weeks to do because it was just, you got to match up your audios, and then you got to get your timeline, and then, but that's how you learn it. That's the best way that I learn it. Like, that's the best way that I've learned it in filmmaking, is putting your edit together in post-production. Then you see everything. You see all the flaws. The lamp was too close. The shading was off. The lighting was off. The audio was off. The camera angle was off. There's so many things that goes into this. But I'm glad that we did episode 2. We are consistent. I think we have to surpass episode 5 to get past the drop-off rate. Usually people, I think, stop at episode 5 or something like that. There's a specific episode where the average people who start a podcast drop off on.
A lot of them drop off after the first one.
They don't even start.
Well, that's the biggest barrier right there is 0. You get to 1, you're ahead of most people.
You know what the hardest belt is to get in jiu-jitsu?
What's that?
What do you think?
The first one.
Yes, sir. Everyone's like, black belt's like, no, the white belt.
That's the longest one, for sure.
Dude, even there, But with that, episode 2 is officially in the books. If I had some champagne right now, I would pop it. I would. This is a celebratory moment, I think. This is.
So everyone out there, figure out what masculinity means to you. Take the baseline that we gave you, and then build it for yourself. And give us your feedback too on, do we sound like dumbasses on the things that we talk about, or are we making? I feel like we both made very solid, valid points. And I truly believe that if people are struggling with this topic and don't know what it is, they want to be masculine, don't have a clue, that the insights that we gave here can help you.
Yeah, I believe so. Well, I mean, I think we have a pretty good baseline of what it is. But from there, that baseline, it gets into subject matter.
We're paving the road for you, but you have to walk it.
As everyone has to walk it. We all walk it. Walk it like you talk it. That's why they made a song about it.
The journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step.
All right, with that, like, subscribe, comment. Let us know what you think. If we sound like, if you cannot stifle my buffoonery anymore, please let me know in the comments. I will read the ball and respond. So, like, subscribe, comment. We love you. Thank you to everyone who's watched and liked and interacted and reached out. Thank you so much, and we look forward to continue to do this and have a guest on our episode 3. So, good night, guys. Thanks for watching.